My shutter release button is here. I'm just looking to see where that connects. That's all good. That has a return spring on it, and the return spring was subtly damaged because the shaft had been pushed through it like this. So I've got to make sure that that spring is nice and straight, and make sure that I don't make the same mistake. Now we know that someone had been buggering around with the shutter release on the shutter in this camera. I wouldn't be at all surprised if that wasn't an attempt to improve the action of the shutter release, not realising that the problem lay in this position, not down in the shutter. That'll work nicely, there's no problem there. And that rotates roughly through 180 degrees. I think that'll be fine. I'm just trying to decide whether I should just fit the top of the camera at this stage so that I'm not struggling with that while I'm busy trying to get other pieces together. Where did that spring go? Oh, there it is. I'll just apply some molybdenum paste to the shaft here of the shutter release. Doesn't need as much as that either. Let's rub that off. And he needs a fine film. Pop that into position. That's good. I can put the shutter release button in position. Our film release button. It needs a tiny smear of lubricant in there, and its return spring fits there. I should be able to fit the top cover. I may well have to come back to making an adjustment yet, but this could make it much easier to get that shutter fitted again if I've got everything correctly placed up here. It's not wanting to pick up there for some reason. That's better. That all moves smoothly. I'll put the screws in to hold the top cover in place, and then I will attempt to fit the shutter and hope that I have the timing correct for that cocking gear. It looks promising. Right, that looks good. So the shutter, let's open up that diaphragm. What have I got this set to? Why won't that revolve? Oh, it is revolved. It is open. Okay. Make sure there's no graphite powder or dust floating around in there. And the rear group, which I haven't yet cleaned. That's bad planning. Let me have a look at this. It's got a little daub of crap on it, but obviously it's settled on there. And the glass doesn't look very clean either, so we'll just give that a quick clean. Fit that in place. I want this in place before I fit the shutter. Sometimes they're a bit of a fight to get them in the back of the camera, and I would much rather I didn't go through that process. Had enough with fights. Right, the inner surface. There's a few funny marks on there. They may be coating marks, we'll find out. In the outer surface, when you're cleaning lenses with cotton buds, rotate the cotton bud as you go to keep presenting a fresh surface to the glass to help guard against picking up some grit and grinding it into the glass. There's a little bit of coloration around the edge of that lens, which may be oil, probably is. That's good. That speck came out, that's good. Yes, there's a few marks on this surface. That doesn't surprise me greatly. It's open to abuse. Anything people can get fingers to, they will. So surfaces that are exposed will get damaged. I'm just going to put a friction tool on there and tighten that up. Not sure which is the best size to use. That might do it. That'll do it. No, it didn't. It did not. That's better. Alright, the shutter. What do we know about the shutter? Well, one thing we know about the shutter is that the flash contact needs to be connected up with this little connector. So it has to sit on there, and the wire fed down between the connector and the screw and tightened up. And of course, it has to be done in some impossibly tiny area. You only need 3 hands for this job. That may have done it. So, the shutter release, I have to make sure that that's rotated to the up position, and it is. The cocking action at the top of the shutter I don't have to worry about the positioning of, because it can only go in one position. I'll see if I can get this to fit. It's pivoting on something. Oh, it's pivoting on that flash insulator. I think that connected to everything. Let's see if we can cock the camera. No, our film release button's stuck down there. Look at that. Cocks and fires. That's great. The retaining ring. Get the retaining ring in before anything gets disturbed. And I could see, once I had the retaining ring out, that the notches in it were fairly bashed about by whatever tool a previous repairer had used. I've done something I shouldn't have done here. What have I done? I know. On the back of the shutter there was a shim. Now the shims are generally used to match a lens and shutter assembly to the body so that everything will be in sharp focus. But they're also useful for providing a bit of standoff or space sometimes, because sometimes when things have been manufactured there isn't sufficient clearance for things to work smoothly, and often if you put a little spacer in the back all your problems go away. So it's good practice to put shims back in place even though you might not need them in order to match the focus of the shutter and lens assembly to the body, because we'll be doing that anyway, but just because it might allow a mechanism to work smoothly that otherwise didn't quite have enough clearance to do so. And of course that's something that I found out to my cost at some stage in the past. Like most valuable lessons, the painful ones are remembered best. Right, see if I can get that onto the shutter, and then the shutter back in position. Oh, it can't have been that easy. Yeah. We're not getting B. Alright, retaining ring. Get this on. Get that tightened up, and we'll be going back into the front of that shutter to get that B to work correctly, because it's not. Yeah, the reason I picked that shutter, those shims weren't present, is quite simple, because when the shutter, before I'd taken it apart, I knew that the notches in the retaining ring with top and bottom of the retaining ring where they're difficult to get at. And when I put them back, they weren't top and bottom, so I knew that they weren't in the same position. And the logical answer was that I hadn't put the shims in place. Number 1 to the Film Advanced locks, that's good. One second, what's that sound like? Sounds very good. Now B, what happens at B? B, look at that, that's just instant. Alright. I'll be opening the front of that shutter up and finding out the solution. Fortunately, the operation was a success. On the B setting, the shutter works correctly now. The solution was that buggered up shutter release lever in there. I needed to do even more work filing it and reshaping that tip that had been mutilated in order to get it to function. Let's see if the self-timer still works. Yeah, it's running down, that's good. This is set to 1/8 of a second at the moment too, by the way. Right, I'll blow the dust out of that shutter once more, and then I'm going to fit the middle element, and all going well, we'll be in business. That looks good. Well, I'm getting near the end of this now. I've reassembled the lens, I've focused that now, that's all correct, that's running smooth. The front surface of the front element there is, you've got quite a few marks on it. Slight cleaning marks perhaps. Possibly it's had some spray or something on or moisture has got on it at some stage. Something has contaminated it and been allowed to sit there, and it's marked the coating. I don't think it's a serious issue. Now, in the stages of closing this thing up, of course I need to put the leatherette back on the base of the camera. And here I have my leatherette, which I've cleaned as well as I can clean the glue surface. The other surface certainly is dirty and needs to be cleaned as well, but I want to glue that back on the camera first. So I will apply some adhesive to that, and we'll get this back on the camera body. After I got to the stage where I wanted to install the centre lens group, I tested the shutter once more and I got it to fail on the B setting. And so once more I went back into the camera and adjusted with a file the shape of that shutter release lever that had been butchered up. And now I'm fairly confident that it works reliably on B. Of course, I discovered that as soon as I went to assemble the lens and focus the lens. And I discovered, well, of course, you can only focus the lens if you've got it open on B. And it didn't stay open. There's the long and the short of that. Even though it had tested up fine earlier while the camera was disassembled, well, I had the shutter out separately, it turned out that there wasn't enough travel in the shutter release mechanism to reliably allow the B lever to drop into position. Well, that's fitted in there quite well. That looks good. I'll get the shutter release lever back in position and put the leatherette patch back on that. Well, I won't make any money fixing this camera. Would have been a better financial proposition to go and mow my neighbours' lawns, I think, for the time they've invested in this thing. And I can see that once more my video camera is complaining about the state of the battery. Right, leatherette patch back on the base. Back catch cover all back in place correctly. Frame counter working, correctly moving one frame at a time. What do we need? We need the rewind knob. And the rewind knob, I think we'll clean that up first because the rewind knob feels a bit gritty. What have we got in here? Let's have a look. Little bit of dust and grit. Little bit of corrosion perhaps. Let's wipe that dust out of there. Yes, corrosion I'd say. Wipe that off there, nothing serious. Put a smear of grease on that wavy washer. Not because we particularly need to lubricate it, but because it will protect it from corrosion or further corrosion. Run the screw back in, tighten that down. Check the action. This is just a film reminder dial. Serves no practical purpose these days. Once upon a time it might have done. So that's back on. Something through the fork of the rewind to stop it from turning. Tighten the knob with my fingers. That's it. The leatherette, that really needs a bit of a clean up. I'm going to give that a wipe with some wax, I think. Right, let's just rub some of this black wax renovating polish into the back of this leatherette. Just to give it a little bit more shine. Oh yeah, that looks a little bit prettier. And the same in the front. The back, here's the back look. The back looks good. And the base, well, the base doesn't look too bad actually. Give that a quick rub over. So apart from the slightly scruffy state of the front lens group, which has certainly got some cleaning marks on it, we'll say, the rest of it is all good to go. And the viewfinder, the framing lines are nice and parallel with the camera now, not staring off into space, and the viewfinder is nice and clear. So I would say that we'll call this a successful job. Nice depth of field pointers there, moving with the, as you change the aperture. That's good. So that is a Retinette II, and this is quite an uncommon model. You don't see many of them about. This one's not the most pretty one in the world, but at least it exists and at least it works. So thanks for watching.